Now, we're going to take a moment to explore the problems that face the experiential environments before we give you a few of the solutions we see.
Look, we work in a quick and dirty industry. I think we all realize that by now, from plastics to food waste to all those little freebies that delegates probably throw away before they've even left the convention hall. Even the best meaning of events are still producing around 1.89 kilograms of waste per delegate per day, and only 35% of that waste at the moment is recyclable. Now, the tide is turning, I'm pleased to say, and I don't just mean in terms of brands and suppliers being more conscious of the impact that they're having on the environment, but also in terms of the consumer who's willing to pay more for quality, for sustainability, and actually not just willing, but demanding of it. I think the impact that we're having on the environment around us is impossible to ignore as our collective consciousness continues to blossom. And that's why we, as experienced professionals, really do have a responsibility to get up here to lead the charge, because it has to be about more than keep cups and metal straws. Because at its heart, experience and live experiences and events are so important to our clients and have so much value that moving forwards, they're just going to continue to accelerate both in volume and in importance. And, you know, we need to try and make a change for good.
So Nat's just touched on the dark side of the event industry. But now I want to take a moment on the dark side of sustainability. There's something slow about the sustainability movement. It's becoming a buzzword, we're all talking about it, but action and pickup seems to be quite slow. So why is that? Damon thinks it's something to do with the negative narrative in the environment around us. We are creatures of habit. Our context and environment inform everything we do. And unfortunately, the information we're receiving at the moment is very underpinned by fear and anxiety. It's making us think the problems we face are too big and too existential to address. It's creating a pattern of avoidance behavior, where we'd almost rather do nothing than do something. So we just continue in these patterns of convenience. And we're just here today on stage to say, we have a responsibility to stop that and to find solutions and to solve some of the problems in each of our roles. So what's the common thread between events and the environment? Well, we think events are going to accelerate in number and importance. We think that because the environment around us is more complex than it's ever been before. And we think live experiences are going to be a way for brands to control the context in which they deliver their messages. We think that technology is continuing to drive disconnect in a really real way. And live experiences are going to elevate those moments of human interaction. We think as people have a rising consciousness around these issues, that live experiences are going to provide the opportunities we need to collaborate. So, a really short example of this that I'm sure you're all familiar with is that Greta, for example, created a moment back in 2018. Just one moment, a one-woman show, where she didn't go to school one Friday to protest climate action. Now, within that, she managed to galvanize an entire global movement. And last year in September, we saw the biggest environmental demonstration we've ever seen, with 7 million people around the world gathering around a communal experience to raise awareness. So, we think we need to let go of the idea that the events and environment don't go together, that they conflict each other somehow. And we need to do that by rethinking how we actually marry the two together.
And so it actually seems that the problem might in fact be the solution. On one hand, we need to break down the psychological barriers. We need to rebrand sustainability, move it away from something that seems scary and distant and sometimes a little shameful when you get it wrong, to something that's everyday and convenient and something that makes us feel positive. On the other hand, we've got live experiences, and we're trying to work out how we can make them better, how we can transform them in order to make them more positive and have a more positive impact on the world around us. And so really what we should be doing is tapping into the very thing that makes live experiences so important, so impactful, and use that to actually carry our message. Because live experiences and events are real enablers of progress. They enable communication, they enable collaboration, they bring people together and facilitate discussion. And so actually our real role is to understand how we can best use them in order to make the change that we want to see in the world. Perhaps it's creating a proof of concept that then helps you sell in a more sustainable strategy to a partner or a client. Perhaps it's educating and inspiring your peers, which perhaps we'll do with one person in this room. Or perhaps it is enacting it and being the change that you want to see in the world. Every little step actually counts.
So as Nat says, events are a trigger for transformation. And before we get to some tangible takeaways that you can apply to the experiential space to be that little bit more sustainability and start on your journey or continue it, we think it's important to just give you some principles for engagement. Because actually, sustainability doesn't work unless you've got the human behavior behind it to make the change. These are a few learnings that we've taken from some of our experiences so far. And I also think it's important to say that our theory of change behind people and motivation is that if they are motivated and if they are capable and if they have the opportunity, then they are much more likely to act. So with that in mind, when you take your sustainability journey forward, make sure that you're educating people on the problem and why it needs to be addressed. Make sure you're connecting people so that they're able to collaborate and find new solutions and new ways of doing things. And make sure you're clear on your communications so that you can actually create that change that you're looking for.
But the very first thing that you need to do is stop the guilt. I find it fascinating how in the society that we live in today, we've become so obsessed with the meaning that underpins every single action that we see a brand or individual take. We see a real shift towards a visible and emotional sustainability, if you will, that's full of big, flashy slogans, big promises that may or may not be acted upon. There's a real sense that for a brand to do any good, they need to go all in. And if they're not going all in, then it might not as well try. The problem is there's a real danger with this, because we have a lot of brands and even clients that we both worked with who are actually afraid of celebrating the small wins. They're afraid of publicizing the little steps in the right direction, which means that others then can't learn from their efforts. And so the question I'd like to pose to you is, does it really matter? Does it really matter why an action is taken if at the end of the day it gets us to the sustainable goal that we have been trying to get to? Maybe it's controversial, I don't know, but personally I think the answer is no. As per this quote that I quite like from Tim Brown, it's all about getting better rather than feeling like you have to have a complete solution. If you have to have a complete solution, then you don't get out of bed in the morning. And it might sound simplistic, but honestly, if we were to enact true, meaningful change, we need to celebrate rather than berate. And we need to make sure that our clients, our peers, our suppliers, our customers are all doing the same. So please remind each other. So where does that leave us? It leaves us thinking big by starting small. I implore you, be bold, be brave. You can't always please everyone at the same time, and that's okay, because you can still make an impact. And actually, there's a real strength in recognizing that you don't have all the answers, but being willing to try anyway.
So, it's okay to start small, but how do we start smart? And we think that's all about separating green and greenwash. We think that's to do with being authentic and aligned. So for us, we've given a little example here of a greenwash equation that applies to every business in every sector and every industry. To be authentic, you need to find what's relevant to you. You need to address the negative impacts you're already having. For events, that's sometimes quite obvious. It's the plastic piled up at the end of the day, the leftovers from the delegates. It's everything you print that doesn't get used. So avoid the easy and the positive contributions. There's no point having that plastic piled up and then having a staff cleanup day or putting hashtag Save the Whales behind you. It just doesn't work. For Jack Morton, when we looked at sustainability, we looked at that negative impact, the problems that we're creating, and we developed the framework aiming for zero. That's aiming for zero single-use plastic, zero avoidable waste, and zero carbon emissions. Now, it's not a perfect framework, and we're not there on everything, but it does mean everyone in the organization from concept to planning stage is able to align and push in the same direction. Again, in the sentiment of this presentation, it means that we're all taking small steps that are adding up to some sort of bigger impact. So, here's the money shot. Here's the tangible takeaways. Here's how you can think big by starting small. We're not saying you need to get it perfect or right first off, but we are giving you a few examples, a few small things that you can start to do and hopefully improve and move towards the right-hand side of this slide as you continue on in your sustainability journey. So we're not going to go into everything here, but by all means, we're willing to share this. We're also willing to chat to any of you about how you make this more relevant and aligned to your business. So do please come speak to us if you're interested. But just for a quick example, we've got food here. Food waste has become a bigger and bigger issue. So you could start small by just restricting a menu. We find that that has a big difference on how much food waste is left at the end of the day. We also think you can cut out red meat from your events. That reduces carbon emissions, not only because the amount that goes into the production of red meat, but the amount that actually it creates in terms of landfill. And even still, go one step further. Find a food waste partner. Make sure that at the end of your event, you have somewhere to divert your food. Because let's be honest, we won't ever get rid of over-catering in the event space. There is nothing worse than a hungry guest. Another example we can look at is power. We can start by just reducing the demand that our experiences require. We can do that by picking venues with more natural light. It's as simple as that. Or we could decide to offset our carbon emissions. Now, you can do that by adding a small price to your tickets. You can do it by planting trees. There's so many options. And again, we just recommend you take the most aligned path for you and your organization. Finally, you could even decide to power your whole event with renewable energy. Maybe solar is your solution. We're going to now explore where we've taken some of these small steps to big brands. In the nature of this whole event, we will share the good, the bad, and the ugly. It hasn't always worked first time round, but the point is, we're learning as we go, and we'll improve for next time.
So we actually had a very big task for Samsung last year. They asked us to help them to deliver a consistent brand message across 16 different locations, talking to a lot of different audience groups, some B2B, some B2C, and also delivering on a lot of different proof points. Now, what we did is we created a reusable modular framework, which we were able to maneuver around to fit any room of any shape, and also helped us deliver over 80 different types of content, saving on water, power, paper. Now, I know what you're thinking. I'm conscious I am showing you a large LED cube, and I'm sure you're thinking, did that not use a lot of power? And you know what, it did. But I think the story that we're trying to tell here is that sustainability, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. It's a journey that you and your clients, your partners need to join on at whatever stage you're at. And the idea is then kind of making the small steps or the steps you are able to change, and then also look into the future. And if we were to do another iteration of this, perhaps it would be how can we actually start to use more natural, renewable energy sources in order to power this experience. Looking at the Google Cloud Summit in Sydney, we actually had a global playbook handed down from the US, which very much inspired the tone for the creative tone for the experience, if you will. But once we actually started to dig a little bit deeper into the production, starting to understand waste disposal, talking to suppliers, we were actually really disheartened to understand the true nature and the depth of the waste problem in New South Wales. And so, seeing as what we were trying to create was an event that was more a community than a conference, we knew that we'd really need to hang our hat on what we were saying and make a real commitment to reducing the impact that we were having on the environment. So we made sure that everything that we built, from all the stand builds to the sponsor booths, was recyclable. So in the end, 96% of stand build materials were actually recycled, and anything that was bespoke that was built has actually been saved and will then be reused in future events. We managed to save 4,230 litres of water simply by using recycled paper in lanyards and name badges. We saved 10,000 single-use cups just by giving out reused water bottles and recyclable cups. Now, what I'm saying is this was far from perfect. Our team was still dumpster diving at the end of the day, fetching out these reusable coffee cups out the bins. But as I said, it's a journey, and journey is about learning. And actually, the learning here was very interesting in terms of recycling is actually quite a complex topic. And what we tried to do is simplify it in order to, hoping that we'd kind of cut through, everything would be really simple. But actually what we realized is we'd oversimplified it. You need to find a little bit of a balance. Because I'm sure all of you in this room have walked up to a number of different recycling bins and kind of stopped and thought, where do I actually put this? You know, I myself, only fairly recently, to be quite honest with you, realized that the bioplastic goes in the green compost bin because it's made out of plants. And you know what, I'm a little bit embarrassed, but I'm also happy to admit that to you today, because we're all learning, but also there needs to be more education and more communication, because if we are all to try and get better, to improve, we need to talk about these things. And look, I mean, I think it's fascinating, learning every day, and I mean, I hope that you guys too will be interested in finding out more.
So we'll leave you with this. We've said start small, but we also appreciate that the challenges ahead of us are quite significant. Fortunately, we do often defy the odds. The experiential space particularly gives us a huge opportunity for engagement, to really create the change we need to see in the environmental space. Who knows, maybe even next year we can make Pause Fest the benchmark for an environmental experience.